everyone. Welcome to the Coach Gerald Lami podcast. I will be bringing you content with some of the best sport personalities around the world and sharing a journey with the listeners and inspiring the next generation. Today, I've got someone who's helped me along my journey, someone I hold in high regards, someone who really believed in me and helped me to be in the position that I am today. Someone that I look up to, really, someone that I see as a father figure. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my special guest for today, John Keys, a.k.a. The Chief. Welcome, Keys. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, mate. How you doing? Are you all right?
Not bad. So before we get into it, what made you get into the line of work that you're doing? And if you can explain to the listeners what you're actually doing.
Yeah, no problem. So 11 years ago, I worked in construction all my life from when I was 16 up until the age of 42. And I'd made some pretty bad choices around that time 11 years ago. And a friend of mine worked at Arsenal Football Club. Unfortunately, I had to leave home and couldn't see my wife and kids for a while. And he gave me a bit of a lifeline and asked me to go out and start working on what was called the Kicks programme for Arsenal in Hackney. And that's what I did. And that lifeline absolutely changed my life. I lived in a world where I earned enough money where I didn't need to worry about anything, and I was only really concerned with myself. And getting that job is probably, I could say, the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Okay. So if you could just take us back to like your childhood, where did you learn your foundation from?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midlands near Stratford-on-Avon. I'm one of 7 children, 5 girls and 2 boys. My dad was a hard-working Irish guy who liked to work hard and play hard. He was pretty tough character. But yeah, you get some values and morals, don't you, from your parents? And my mum and dad were very good at that. And I was always into my sport a lot, but never realised what social impact the sport could have until I started that job 11 years ago, which for me was a real eye-opener, and how much football means to everybody around the world.
So you always, like I said at the intro, you've helped me along my journey, and I know you've helped a lot of others as well. But what made you get into that line of work to just give back and, help others?
Well, like I said, when I lost my job in construction, and then I went up to Arsenal to see Freddie, and we had a chat about what sort of work they were doing. There was stuff going on 8 miles from my house that I had no idea about. And those kids needed me, or they needed someone. I think if you went back and interviewed them now and said, "Oh, there's a middle-aged white guy coming to help you," they're all going to go,
Yeah.
"What? No, he's not." But as you know, because you know lots of the people I've worked with, we've forged some good relationships, which have now turned into friendships as those lads have become adults. And it's one of those things for me that, I had a real epiphany and a light bulb moment that actually the money isn't everything, and helping other people was far more rewarding. And I never ever thought I'd say that, but it really opened my eyes to another side of the world, like I said, that I didn't know existed.
Mm-hmm. So talk about, you getting into that work. So like you said, a lot of the kids, I was one of those kids as well that didn't really trust anyone, especially if someone, had a certain profile about them. Like, how was that transition to try and convince the kids that you're actually for them? Was that hard, or did you find it quite easy?
No, mate, it was really difficult. When I was in construction, I used to run building projects. I had 200 blokes working for me on one site, and I'm a bit of a director when it comes to getting people to do things and telling people what to do. And
I know about that.
And I ended up going to a housing estate in Hackney on a Friday. I'll never forget it. I drove onto the estate, and as I drove on, I saw 20 kids sitting on a wall drinking and smoking, and I'm like, wow. So I parked the car up near the cage, walked round the corner, and started talking to them. Lads, we're starting football here on Tuesday. Come along if you want to. I don't know if any of them could even hear me. I had a certain fear in my stomach, thinking, wow, why am I doing this? But one of the lads sat on the end of the wall, said, "Don't worry, mate, we'll be there." And he actually went on to work for me. But for me, it took months. They used to throw things at my car and ask me if I was wearing a wire because they thought I was a policeman, which I know a lot of you thought at the time when you first met me, because I asked lots of questions.
Yeah.
But I was only asking questions because I wanted to find out what was going on in terms of how the world worked where they lived, because it was very different to the world I lived in. And there's one lad who I defended in a court case. Actually, two lads from that estate, but one of them never spoke to me for 6 months. He just used to walk past me.
Mm.
And then
So
eventually,
did you,
when I was helping the other guy, he came and asked me and said, "I'm in the same case as him. Will you come and help me?" Which I did.
mm. So did you ever feel like, because you wasn't being heard, did you ever feel like you just want to give up? Like, what's the point of this? I'm trying to help, but these kids are not taking me on.
No, not really, because when I got there, to me, it was like it wasn't like a war zone, but it was like there was so much going on every day. So I got to the point where I used to get there. I used to drive to the estate in the morning, park up there, and just sit there all day and just watch what went on all day, because I wanted to know who the characters were and who was involved in certain things, and did everybody go to school or didn't they, and get to meet some of the parents. And it it's incredible that actually, and I
Mm,
keep saying this to people and still saying it now after doing this work for 11 years, that time is the most valuable thing you can give to anybody.
mm,
So sitting and listening to young people telling me I keep getting arrested and the feds, as they like to call them, don't leave me alone. And my thing was about getting them to understand how the world worked, because they lived in what I would call a bubble, really. So they lived on their estate. They didn't go past one road. They didn't go past another. They just lived in a very small world.
mm.
But we were then able to broaden their horizons. Get a minibus and let's go to Islington and play a football match. And they were all going, "Wow, go to Islington." It's 2.5 miles away.
Yeah, I
So
can
that
relate to
that
that as
took a
well.
lot. It took a long time for me to understand all that process and why they didn't want to go. But eventually, as you know, we got to where we needed to get to. But it was a tough journey. It wasn't an overnight success anyway. That's for sure.
Mm. So how long was you at Arsenal for?
10 years.
Okay.
I actually left on May the 31st, 2019, after doing 10 years service. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said before, you done a lot of work, especially just in the community. Because like I said at the beginning, when I was just introducing you in terms of like you believing in me, and I think that's one thing like the kids in especially like Hackney or just in general in inner city London is you don't really have anyone that believes in you because again a lot of us there's just like you said we're in a certain bubble, especially if you don't stretch yourself, you don't come out of your comfort zones and you don't do much traveling. You just think this is your world and that's it, so you're just stuck. So when you got someone like you coming in to believe in us and just give us opportunities, like even things like when you took me on board and I've done a bit of traveling, but just things like you taking me to Ireland and visiting the crews and the prisons and things like that, that was an eye opener for me, and just for me to share my story to them. It was like I wouldn't have had that opportunity if you didn't really believe in me and just throw me in the deep end, because there was times where I'll be nervous to just be in front of people and explain my story because I'm never really that character to open up that much. But things like that you just put me outside my comfort zone just really helped me to stretch and grow as a person. So I'm not too sure if I'm sure I've told you this before, but I just appreciate everything that you've done for me. So
I know that. I know that. It's interesting though. If you remember when we were in Belfast and we were
yeah.
at a youth club and we were going down to
Mm,
that pitch, and you said to me, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm
mm.
walking to the pitch, aren't I?"
Yeah,
And you got in the car and went down because you were too scared to
yeah,
walk down from where we were. It was 500 yards away.
yeah. I was thinking this is not my zone. I don't know what's happening over here. So, but what did you learn? What did you learn at your time, like working in Hackney?
Where what? Sorry.
What did you learn? While you're working in Hackney, what sort of things did you encounter?
Loads of things. Obviously, a lot of the stuff at the time was all around these postcode wars that were going on. Um, we don't get on with these guys, we don't get on with those guys. But what I found incredible was that most of those lads in the different postcode gangs, if you want to call it that, all went to school together. But because of where they lived, there was conflict. And I like to think that over the 10 years that we managed to wipe out a lot of that conflict, or lads were all of a sudden playing football together representing Arsenal in the community. But as soon as they left, it was back to what they were doing before, and that's not necessarily anything illegal. But the fact that, there's John Keys from Islington. I'm not speaking to him. I didn't get any of that stuff to start with. But as I said, I absolutely immersed myself in that world for the first 2 or 3 years I was at Arsenal, and then I got to understand how it all worked. But we built relationships with the police, and we got establishing trust is the hardest thing you have to do in your life, isn't it? And you'll know this, when you met me, I'd say things to you and you'd go, "Oh, there's no way we can do that." And I'll be going, "Gerald, just come on, let's get it done." And it is a bit about that. There is a huge mistrust of adults, isn't there? I think we've lost 2 generations of young people because of a mistrust and, false promises from other youth work organisations or local authorities saying, "Yeah, we're going to do this," and actually it just never happened. And then
that's the thing.
Go on.
And that's the thing there. No, that's the thing where we've, like I said, in terms of like believing in us and things like that, we had a lot of people that would come in and say, "Yeah, we'll do this," and even things down to like facilities, like where I grew up around Stamford Hill and Joseph Court and things like that. We've had that concrete pitch for years, and there's always, "Oh yeah, we're going to change the pitch and we're going to put Astros and things like that," but it never came to fruition. Like no one really cared deep down. Do you know what I mean? So I think again, like that's why when you came along and you wasn't promising anything, but you'd say, "I would help." Do you know what I mean? As much as you can. So that was one of the main things. But what would you say that these kids need in terms of like facilities or opportunities?
Well, if you look at, so use that as an example, the facilities. So in London Field, the pitch because we've worked there together, Broadway Market, that pitch didn't cost 50 grand. We put up new floodlights, we built walls, we laid an AstroTurf, we bought new goals, we then put on a big football programme. The impact of that, if you dropped a stone in a pond and we talk about the ripple effect of that pitch being there is huge because, and again, you worked with me, we worked in a secondary school down the road, 5 minutes down the road from there. And it was easy for us, wasn't it? Because all the kids in the school were the ones that came to football. And all of a sudden, there's a trust built. So if you looked across Hackney and Islington, I mean, Islington's a bit different because I think they've actually got more AstroTurf pitches. But
yeah, they do.
If you actually had a rollout programme and said, "You know what we're going to do? We need to get Joseph Court done in Stamford Hill." Why? Because there's nothing there. So let's get it done. And for me, the return on the investment will be huge because you will then have 11, 12-year-olds coming to football who by the time they're 16, 17 will hopefully be working for you because they've been on a journey with you. And then their outlook on life is totally different to the lad that doesn't bother coming and sits in on his Xbox.
For sure.
I mean,
for sure.
I just want to read you something, actually, if that's all right. When I first started working in Hackney, the community sergeant there was an excellent guy. He worked there for 23 years. We're still good friends now. He gave me this piece of paper, and I only found this the other day. Our starting point. There is a broader challenge, which is that we need to start doing something. People are very committed, but we need a trigger and a mechanism for actually doing something about it, not in terms of a singular impact, but a holistic approach to making this vision a reality and translating it into real improvements in people's lives. We need to engage people in the community so that they have confidence in themselves and the people that represent them to achieve real positive change. If we're going to do something, then let's do it for the right reasons and to the best of our ability.
Wow, it's powerful.
So that for me was a real powerful piece of paper that was handed to me. But again, it highlights some of the issues, doesn't it? That we've got to be confident in the people that we're working with. So
Mm.
When we first met, I think you're sort of looking at me thinking, who is this guy? But as we got to know
I
each other,
definitely was. Yeah.
yeah, but as we got to know each other and you asked me for something, I did everything within my power to do it.
You did. You did.
So, and I'm not saying that about me, but this is the issue,
Yeah.
isn't it? That you need to be able to find the people that are doing it because they want to do it and not because it's a job.
Mm. And that's what I was gonna. That's exactly what I was gonna touch on now, because, like you said, you got handed that piece of paper, which I'm sure a lot of others probably got handed that piece of paper as well in terms of making a change. But you actually went to these areas where a lot of people are scared to even drive past, let alone walk
Absolutely.
into their estates. Do you know what I mean? So, like, what advice would you give to those workers or those social workers that want to make the impact, but just feel like they don't have the power or even have the courage to go and speak to these young children? Because, like I said previously, we've had a few people that would come into the state, and you could see straight away from the body language like they don't really want to be here or they're scared. Do you know what I mean? So you're not really going to take them on board.
Well, I think that there's a couple of things. The first one is about the fear thing.
Mm,
People used to say to me, "Oh, what, you're working in Hackney now, and you might get stabbed and all that." Well, with all due respect and without being too blasé, if somebody's running at me with a sharp knife, there's not really a lot I can do because I'm not as fast as I
mm.
was 30 years ago. So
Yeah.
we've got to be able to deal with those incidents and find out why those kids are carrying those knives.
Mm,
When and it says it there, doesn't it? That what we need to be able to do, it said it in that statement.
mm,
If they're carrying that knife because of a fear, let's address what that fear is. But,
mm,
but what I found was when I first started working, and as I started working more around other areas of Hackney, people would get a paintbrush and there was a map on the wall, and they'd paint every area the same colour going.
mm,
We can't deal with those kids in that area, they're out of control. Well, actually, my personal view on what I did was I proved everybody wrong. They're not out of control, but they have a mistrust of people. So therefore, we've got to be able to build that trust back up. And that doesn't happen in a 4-week football project, does it?
no, not at all.
And that's quite frustrating. And I agree with you, mate. How many times did people come and visit us and you're looking at the bloke thinking he's not going to last
Yeah,
5 minutes doing this job?
definitely. I'll tell you that. Yeah, for sure, for sure. But so I know you read a lot of books, and you've encouraged me to read a lot of books, which I've definitely got into a bit more. Would you encourage a lot of young people to do that?
Yeah, I do. And also that I encourage. So now at the moment, I'm working for Huddersfield Town Foundation. I
Hmm.
moved up to Yorkshire a couple of years ago. Um, what I try and do is, even though the problems are the same, obviously they're not on the same scale as what I was used to dealing with. But if I find a book that I think is relevant to the staff, particularly, so I've got quite a few of the staff reading some of the books that we taught within school, me and you together. Um,
Hmm.
Reading is not for everybody, but I think it's also important to get the messages out from those books. I don't know whether I recommended it to you. There's a book called Street Boys, which is a true story about a housing estate in South London, which isn't there anymore. Actually, it's now been demolished. You can imagine the high rises because we worked in those places. And it tells the story of those boys growing up and their families and their friends and their girlfriends and everything else. So about 18 months ago, I had to have an operation. I was at home for a week and I read it in 2 days because I couldn't put it down. But basically, it was telling a story of all the kids that me and you have worked with, but just in a different part of London.
Mm,
So I think there's a tendency, isn't there, when you're working in this environment, they go, so let's use the fields as an example. Oh, London Fields. Oh, well,
mm,
when I went there, we played football with the kids before the cage was refurbished, and I pushed a few of the kids into the wall and had a bit of a crack with a few of them, purely
mm,
to see what we were actually dealing with. But you know what? They weren't any different to my kids. They just grew up somewhere else.
mm, mm. That's
So
interesting. That's interesting. So what you said obviously you're working in Huddersfield now. What sort of similarities or differences can you see from like working in Hackney?
there aren't any differences, mate. I don't think. I think that the social issues are the same. I've been doing some work with some people at the yacht, so interviewing and sort of mentoring a few kids who are in trouble. Um, there are issues, but there aren't the issues that we had in Hackney where there were 20 street gangs. I think there are 4 in Huddersfield. But the knife issue is a problem up here. That's always been a problem. I think that problem is growing everywhere, but it's the same thing, mate, just on a smaller scale. I find that there's a huge need for what we're doing, working in lots of schools as I did before in Hackney. And again, because a lot of the participants are a lot younger, we need, in 2 years' time, we'll be in a position where some of our KICS participants now will hopefully be working for us.
Okay.
Which I think was a huge reason pathway, and that's why Hackney worked, didn't it? If you'd have looked back,
for sure.
If you'd have looked back at all your lives 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and look what you're doing now,
it's different.
I don't need to mention names, but the lad you're working with 10 years ago never thought he'd be doing what he's doing now, did he?
No, of course not. Of course not.
So that
I definitely didn't think I'd be doing this as well, to be honest with you myself. But yes, it's that again, that pathway that you said. Even younger people, like someone like Kareem, that's come from playing in the cage to actually coming to Belfast and working out there and coming out here as well, and just seeing him grow as a person as well, which is it's amazing to see.
He's a mentor in a boxing academy. Whoever thought that?
There you go.
Whoever thought that?
But again, it's giving him the foundation. Also, the person themselves, they would have to want to do it. Do you know what I mean? Because there's been loads of times where, you try and help people, but they don't really want to do it.
Yeah, but being realistic, you can't save everyone.
You can't. Yeah, you're right about that. You're right about that.
We were lucky, weren't we, that our targets were about kids playing football. I think all the other stuff we did, we were lucky to be able to do it. Lucky for us, because it's certainly the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And I think lucky for the young lads that took it for what it was and went, do you know what, that's for me. There ain't anybody prouder than me of you and your partner in crime. That. And because when I look at you on, I think, wow, look, podcasts, coaching books, look what we're doing, changing people's lives. And for me, that's the payback. It's not a check for $100,000, albeit I'd love to get one.
Of course, we all do.
Exactly.
Especially these times, mate.
Yeah, but it's all of you. And you very kind in your introduction about how you feel about me. Nothing makes me happier when I get a message from you blokes, because it means that you've
done a lot, Keith. You've done a lot. You've done a lot.
But it means that you haven't forgotten.
No, not at all. Not at all. Again, this is the thing, though, because a lot of people that I've spoken to people before about terms of when they ask you where you're from, say, I grew up in Hackney and things like that. Oh, no, Hackney must be really must be a bad area. I'm like, it's not a bad area. Like, there's good people there. Do you know what I mean? And even if there's things that happen there, it's because of the circumstances. Do you know what I mean? And the way it's just been, the system's just been put there. But in terms of people like this, we don't forget these things, especially if someone's done good for us. We'll never forget that. Do you know what I mean? But do you think the power of sports can really change people's lives?
Oh, absolutely. I said to you earlier on, mate, when I rocked up on that estate, it was used to be run by Leighton Orient, and then Arsenal were given the project. I recorded a music video there. Half a dozen kids from that project ended up working casually for Arsenal. Some of them still work for Arsenal. 10 years down the line, did anybody ever think that would have happened? How many of the lads that you know are teaching assistants in either pupil referral units or primary schools? And these are the lads that were calling out videos on YouTube 10, 11 years ago. And I watch them and think, wow, the kid can't even sing and he thinks he's a pop star. Yeah. So the reward side of it is incredible. And for me, there are conversations I've had with kids that I never thought I'd have when they're able to express themselves to me, or I'd get a phone call from a gang member and say, you know what, there's a kid here said he wants to get involved in what we're doing, but I've told him he needs to work with you. Can you meet us in an hour? And that sort of stuff. That is super, super powerful.
No, for sure. So you don't just do football, you're involved in a rugby community as well. Is there any similarities that you would see in the rugby community compared to the football community?
Yeah, not so much in the rugby community, but like we're working. I'm also still doing some work at the Broncos in West London. We're running a big coaching program involved with SkyTry. That's gone really well. My youngest lad works in a school that's had a lot of help and support from us, where we've delivered a maths program 18 months ago. We used to do maths for an hour and then sport for an hour. And the SATs results in that school went up by 700%, believe it or not.
Wow.
Which I find incredible. Again, I was lucky. So one of the first team players who wanted to be a teacher went in there. So I mean, imagine being a kid and a professional sportsman comes in and goes, right, lads, we're just going to do our times tables. You're sort of sitting there looking with your mouth open. Well, you are, aren't you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, for sure. I can only imagine.
So that's gone real good. I've got a couple of the boys who used to work for me at Arsenal are also working for me there. So we're doing a health and wellbeing program called Getting Match Fit, which is really good. Same principle, an hour's classroom, an hour's rugby. We're doing Bronco boosters in some other schools where we're doing numeracy and literacy. But it's great because I'm able to go back and call on the lads I helped 10 years ago, and they love it, don't they? Because they're looking at kids and seeing themselves probably.
No, for sure. And you even got me across to do a bit of work there in the rugby side of things, and even things like that I would have never thought I'd, because my thing was just football, but just even crossing, paths to that side of the world, and that was an eye opener, and just interacting with people that are in that realm. Do you know what I mean? That was amazing. That was amazing.
Yeah.
So you do, like I said, you take on a lot of people's not responsibilities, but you like to help people a lot. So how do you unwind and just find time for yourself?
Reading is one of them. And she's just walked through the room, and I've probably got the most supportive and best wife in the world, I think.
I know you do, yeah.
So she just said, well timed when I said that. So that's obviously got really good lunch coming today. But that, for me, particularly 11 years ago, has been like a huge part of being able to do what I've done. But yeah, as you get older, you do learn to unwind a bit more, don't you, I think? And, like you said earlier on, during these tough times, everybody's doing different things. And I think, again, when I met you, if you'd have told me you'd be doing yoga to keep your mind off things and improve your flexibility, I'd have gone, what are you on about?
Me too.
That's what I mean. So, you just reading's my real big outlet, I think.
Amazing. So how are you coping during these times anyway?
Yeah, mate, I'm good. Like I said, I've been furloughed from work at the moment, so I've got at the moment I've got like 8 weeks off, but I'm still doing stuff. Like I said, I did a course yesterday. I've got to do an exam this morning. But yeah, I'm fine. I mean, also it is what it is. I'm more concerned about the people who are losing their loved ones and can't go to funerals, and because that must be really tough.
Yeah, no, for sure. But especially like people like you, where you're hands on and you're out there and you're connecting with people as well. Because I've seen you just in terms of you're a people's person. As soon as people see you, they gravitate to you. Like, is there a secret recipe that you've got, or because I've seen people that just they'll look at you and think Keezy's just got it.
Yeah, well, actually, when I read you that thing earlier, that community sergeant, the policeman, used to say to me, "You get it," but I think that also comes from being able to immerse yourself in what they're doing. It's easy to stand on the outside and go, "Well, all those kids are selling drugs. I don't understand why." And people go off on one. Where actually, well, I've never had to sell drugs to feed my family, so I don't know what it's like to have to do it. And also, mate, that if you spend enough time researching something or getting to understand it, then you're able to do something about it, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure, for sure. Now, Keys, last thing I just want to ask you, yeah?
Yep,
Who's running it, Chief?
I'm running the show.
All right, Keys, I love you, man. Thank you for your time. Thank you for just sharing your experience and your journey so far. And I'm sure a lot of people that probably don't listen to this and people that you've helped along the way can, even if they probably didn't have the time to say thank you, I'm sure deep down that you've made a real impact in people's lives. So I appreciate what you've done, Keys.
No problem, my lad. Good to speak to you.
No, perfect. Can anyone get in contact with you? Is there any way that anyone can get in contact with you if they're looking for some help or?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can email me. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Or if they want to
All
know
right.
anything else about what I've done, they can just email me. You've got my email, haven't you?
Yeah, I do. So
So
if
do you want to?
anyone's, yeah, if anyone wants Keys' email, they can just message me privately and
Yeah,
I can share it with them.
perfect.
Yeah, perfect, Keys. Thank you very much.
Good to speak
Enjoy
to you.
your
Look
day.
after yourself.
No, we'll do. We'll do. Cheers, Keys.
Cheers, buddy. Bye.